Good morning, students. I am Riya Sinha, your SST teacher. Today we will review that is our changing Earth. About the lithospheric plates. The lithosphere is broken into a number of plates known as the lithospheric plates. The movement of these plates causes changes on the surface of the Earth, and the Earth movements are divided on the basis of the forces which cause them. Then the forces which act in the interior of the Earth are called endogenic forces, and the forces that acts on the exterior of the Earth or on the surface of the Earth are called as exogenic forces. We have discussed about these forces in earlier classes also. So, endogenic forces sometimes produce sudden movements and at the other times produce slow movements. Sudden movements like earthquakes and volcanoes cause mass destruction over the surface of the Earth. In the previous class, we discussed about volcano and earthquakes also. So let's revise it. A volcano is a vent in the Earth's crust through which molten material erupts suddenly. Similarly, when the lithospheric plates move, the surface of the Earth vibrates. The vibrations can travel all around the Earth, and these vibrations are called earthquakes. The place in the crust where the movement starts is called the focus. Again, I am repeating it. Listen to me carefully. The place in the crust where the movement starts is called the focus. The place on the surface above the focus is called the epicenter. The place where the movement starts is called the focus, and the place on the surface above the focus is called the epicenter. Vibrations travel outward from the epicenter as waves. So, the greatest damage is usually closest to the epicenter, and the strength of the earthquake decreases away from the center. Some of the common earthquake prediction methods adopted locally by people include studying animal behavior. Fish in the ponds get agitated, snakes come to the surface, and so on. So, after that, we discussed about major landforms. The landscape is being continuously worn away by two processes. First process is weathering, and the second one is erosion. We had already discussed both the processes about weathering and erosion. So, weathering is the breaking up of the rocks on the Earth's surface, and erosion is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents like wind, water, and ice. There is a difference. Listen to me carefully. Weathering is the breaking up of the rocks on the Earth's surface. It is a process in which rocks usually break up into several pieces. Obviously, it takes a lot of time. It is not a wonder process. And the second process is erosion. Erosion is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents like water, wind, and ice. Then the eroded material is carried away or transported by water, wind, etc. Obviously, because these are the agents here which used to transport materials from one place to another and eventually deposited to another place. This process of erosion and deposition create different landforms on the surface of the Earth. Okay, now we had already discussed about work of a river also. The running water in the river erodes the landscape. When the river tumbles at a steep angle over very hard rocks or down a steep valley side, it forms a waterfall. See, as shown in the picture. As the river enters the plain, it twists and turns, forming large bends known as meanders. Again, I am repeating this, listen to me carefully. As the river enters the plain, it twists and turns, forming large bends known as meanders. Large bends formed by rivers by its twists and turns known as meanders. Due to continuous erosion and deposition along the sides of the meander, the ends of the meander loop come closer and closer. And in due course of time, the meander loop cuts off from the river and forms a cut-off lake. And this cut-off lake is also called an oxbow lake. Okay, this cut-off lake is also known as an oxbow lake. At times, the river overflows its banks. This leads to the flooding of the neighboring areas. As it floods, it deposits layers of fine soil and other material called sediments along its banks. This leads to the formation of a fertile flood plain. So, as the river gets flooded, it deposits layers of fine soil and other materials called sediments along its bank, and this leads to the formation of a fertile flat flood plain. Okay. The raised banks are called levees. As the river approaches the sea, the speed of the flowing water decreases and the river begins to break up into a number of streams called distributaries. When the speed of flowing water decreases, the river begins to break up. Obviously, then a number of streams formed called distributaries. The river becomes so slow that it begins to deposit its load. Each distributary forms its own mouth. Okay, first of all, meander forms, then due to continuous erosion and deposition, due course of time, meander cuts off from the river and forms a cut-off lake, which is also called an oxbow lake. Then this leads to the flooding in the neighboring areas. As it floods, it deposits layers of fine soil and other material called sediments along its banks, and this leads to the formation of a flat, fertile floodplain. Raised banks are called levees, and as the river approaches the sea, its speed decreases and the river begins to break up into number of streams called distributaries. The river becomes so slow that it begins to deposit its load. Each distributary forms its own mouth, and the collection of sediments from all the mouths forms a delta. Stay at home and stay safe. Thank you and have a nice day.